Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. We got the summertime schedule going. Not a lot of football news, but we did have some action in some other sports. So the NBA had their draft. LeBron's son got drafted. And I hear a lot of people say like, oh man, they took that away from a different kid and things like that. And I always wonder, like, is that true? Like, would another kid have got drafted? It seems very, like, would it matter? Because they say that second round, they don't make contracts anyway. What's the difference if you get drafted or you just sign as a free agent? Because we see some guys from the NBA, they just stick around that were undrafted. And yeah, you're not going to be putting in a lot of time, but I think it goes for all sports. Because you see Major League Baseball guys too, where it's like, except their draft is ridiculous. So it'd be like, so-and-so, look at him. He's doing great in the majors. He was picked in the 38th round. And it's like, why are they having so many rounds? What are you talking about? And then I was talking to some people down here about, like, they were complaining about the Mudcats moving. And they were like, it has to do with them playing, like, college guys now. I'm like, yeah, because they're single A. Like when you've been double A down here for a long time and then you switch to single A and then people stop showing up, it's like you're not seeing guys that you're going to see in the pros. So they have to adjust it. And so now what's going to happen? I don't know. That's why I'm wondering what Major League Baseball, do they even have a long-term plan for some of these minor league moves? Because like the Kinston Indians were down here. They took them away. They put a team back in Kinston, but of course they can't use the Indians moniker anymore because the Indians changed. And I was asking people, just curious, because I'm like, hey, Mudcats, like, do you even know which team they're affiliated with? Like, no one knows. Because, like, they're not using a similar name, and they threw out the microbrews as, like, an alternative, which is a funny name, right? Microbrews. I tried to buy a shirt. Of course, they didn't have my size. I think I mentioned that before. But I'm wondering if Major League Baseball is eventually going to try to change it out, because I thought I read something down here where it's like the Bulls have been with the Rays for a while, I believe, because they were even trying to push it that if the Rays continued to suck and no one was going to them, why couldn't they just switch and make the Durham Bulls the MLB team? I mean, they would have to come up with a bigger stadium or whatever. But if you're getting better attendance at your minor league game, like that's pretty bad, right?
Like self-regulation.
Yeah, you're just like, well, we're just gonna switch it, because like at that point, what's the difference? And I think that would be something, because everyone's always has a hard on for like, oh, relegation, just like the soccer. I wish they did that in college, because people dream like, I'm not donating any money to my college NIL, right? But then they magically think that if relegation was a thing, that like Indiana would start winning Big Ten football championships. It's like, you guys can win one every once in a while if you help put the team together. But like, you're not just going to start like all we need is like Michigan and Ohio State to lose a bunch so they get relegated down, then we'll be the champs, right? That's what people think, right? They think like all these guys that have
it
like
won't happen to me.
Yeah, they have 5 losing seasons in like 100 years. They think like all we need to do is get rid of them somehow with relegation, and then our team is right there to stomp them. Like, Boise State fans, I understand, because, like, they were crying to get into Pac-12. The Pac-12 was all snotty about it, and then the Pac-12 fell apart. Adding Boise, or if they would have just added Texas and Oklahoma and Texas Tech and Oklahoma State back in the day, we never would have had any of this, right? We would have just had 4 big conferences. It would have been the Pac-12, the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten. That would have been it. It was so easy back in the middle of the 2000s to plan it out. And then it never happened, right? Everyone would have been regionalized. You would have had the Big Ten in the Midwest and the North overlapping like the Metro with the ACC down the East Coast. Southeast and Southwest would have been split between SEC, and kind of like the Pac-12 would have been creeping into the Southwest with Texas and Oklahoma. And then the other schools would have from the Big 12 would have just been scooped up to kind of even it up at 16 teams or something like that. Even if they went to 18 or 20, then you have 80 teams total in 4 conferences. Like, it'd be nice. Now it's like, well, we might only end up with 30. It's like, well, who's going to be left out? Like, if you go to a 32 Big Ten and SEC merger, who's getting left out, buddy? Like, you're really condensing it, and that's kind of where I hope it doesn't happen. But it is July 1st, so the change has occurred. The Big Ten now has, 18 members? Oregon, Washington, welcome, brothers. Washington, thank you. You got Michigan a national championship this past year. Really nice of you. Thanks for joining. USC, UCLA, we've been waiting for a while. Lincoln Riley, now he's kind of on the hot seat. Have you seen that?
No.
This is one of my football topics. I've been digging into the Big Ten, getting ready for the season. And I've noticed that a lot of people that were sleeping on Michigan, they're starting to come around because the All-American lists are coming out. Michigan's having multiple dudes on the All-American list for the entire country. Then they're like, oh, well, maybe Michigan's not going to be that bad. And I'm like, I've been saying that the entire time. It's not like where they have one guy left over from a championship team. You have 3, 4, 5 guys that could be on all the All-American lists. Yeah, your team's going to be pretty good. And then you have teams coming in, like USC, that has some guys mentioned, but with Lincoln Riley, they have no faith anymore that he can win big. And so now, from my research into USC and their comfortability coming into the Big Ten, they're not comfortable at all. Where I see a lot of Michigan fans saying oh, USC could be a loss. A lot of USC fans don't think they have any chance. And I don't want to get my confidence up, right? Because I don't know who Michigan's quarterback is, although USC has a new quarterback too. Is Lincoln Riley a quarterback whisperer like they made him out to be at, where was he, at Oklahoma? It could be, the wheels could fall off. So maybe that game won't be as hard. And then you have Oregon. Oregon, from my research into them, they're really pumping up the Dan Lanning was going to be hired by Alabama. Which I thought was there's no way these guys believe that, right? Why would you hire the guy that kept losing to the guy you did hire, right? You wouldn't have that flipped. Well, let's look at their head-to-head. We have 2 guys we're really thinking of. Well, one guy, he always wins, but we want the other guy. No, they wouldn't have thought that. Dan Lanning threw it out with his agent because he was hoping that he would either get a pay raise or maybe he would land the Alabama job and it'd be awesome. Because, you're scared to take after Nick Saban, but it doesn't look like DeBoer is having any issues with recruiting. Their NIL is just pumped up. Nick Saban had that rolling. The only way the wheels are going to fall off for him is because he's drastically changing the offense, which we haven't seen yet, right? We don't know what he's going to come up with. He's kind of an offensive guy. Is he going to come in and be stubborn? And it's not going to work? And then they're just shoving they always say, a square peg in a round hole. Is that going to be the case? Or is he going to come out and just be smart enough to make adjustments to what he has, and Alabama's going to keep rolling? I don't know. But that's the one where Dan Lanning, on the other hand, Oregon has been a program that's been consistent. They're like the Boise State of the Pac-12, right? Where they just keep winning no matter how many coaches leave and get poached. And at some point you have to think, is it the coaches? Didn't Florida State grab Willie Taggart? Wasn't he at Oregon for a year or 2?
Yeah.
And then I feel that would open people's eyes, right? And then Cristobal, he was there for a couple years. Didn't he go to Miami? Hasn't been winning, fumbling at the end of the game instead of taking knees.
But when Tag left, he was only at Oregon for a year or 2. He was
isn't that
still
how long Cristobal was there? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think he was there a couple years.
I should get a list of Oregon coaches. Because I feel at this point, their coaches, for whatever reason, get hyped up. And I'm wondering, is it because of recruiting? And people are like, well, Oregon shouldn't be recruiting this well. Let's keep going here. Or is it something else? So I was thinking, so Willie Taggart was only there for 1 year. Helfrich was there for 3 or 4. Whatever happened to him, he just disappeared. Chip Kelly was there for like 3 years. I miss
Is that all the more he was there?
Chip. Well, I guess 2009 to 2012. So was that be 4 years? So Helfrich would have been 4. Taggart was 1. Cristobal was 3, 4. It looks like he started. He must have coached the bowl game after Taggart, and then when Taggart left, right? Would that have made sense? Taggart goes to Florida State.
Yeah.
He coaches the bowl game in 2017, and then he coaches for his own. So he coaches for his own 4 years. I'd say. I wouldn't say 5. Then McClendon is the one I forgot. He was an interim, whatever, before Dan Lanning. But I will say with Dan Lanning, his win percentage is good. 81.5%. But it's not even as good as what Chip Kelly's was. And he's only been there for, 2 years? So
I feel like the thing that Oregon's always missed, though, was their defense. Like, the offense is, even since Kelly was there, they've had playmakers on offense and guys that could score. But it was like they could never get that big stop when they needed it.
And is Dan Lanning the guy to get that?
I mean, he has that defensive mentality that maybe that's what they need.
So he was at Georgia, and I feel like Georgia's hot right now to where he's getting pumped up as like, oh, this is the guy, he's at Georgia, he's going to be able to come in and win like Georgia. They're the ones, like I said, I think I made a joke earlier where like, what if Michigan beats Texas at the same week that Oregon beats Ohio State? Like, would mayhem happen? It's early in the year, it's like week 2. And I think that's going to be the real eye-opening game. Because Michigan plays Oregon later, and with their unbalanced Big Ten schedule, I'm not really sure how much it hurts. It might be beneficial if Michigan loses 2 games and avoids a Big Ten championship game, right? Because like, why play in another Big Ten champion? Like if you're gonna lose, why not lose those? Oh, actually, they don't even play until the 12th. So I don't know why I was thinking that they played earlier. They play Oregon State, so maybe they wouldn't be playing. Michigan wouldn't be playing Texas at the same time. They must have, you know what it probably was? Fox put out like their list of big games, and I must have assumed those were all like the same opening couple weekends, and I read it wrong. But I could see them, looking at their schedule, I could see Oregon making the championship game. They do have to go to Michigan. I was thinking that Michigan had to go to Oregon. And then, of course, they have to beat Washington. But that Washington team, they seem to just be in full depression. And I don't blame them. They were close to winning the championship game. They lose. Coach leaves. All their players go with them or go to the NFL. You're starting from scratch. Like, there has to be no hype there coming in. It's almost like UCLA. Didn't they just, like, force their coach out and, like, have a bunch of weird things happen? And that's where it's like, I don't know how that's going to go for them.
But I almost wonder if that wasn't like, Chip Kelly, they interviewed him during Ohio State's spring game, and he was just like, I just want to coach football. Like, he just had like going into the Big Ten was going to be like a major headache, and trying to pull, like, UCLA was struggling to be relevant in the Pac-12, and now you're stepping into the Big Ten where you're even further behind the curve because you're bringing some of those Pac-12 mates with you.
He's coaching at Ohio State though, so he's like, I'm just going to go there.
Yeah, he's like, well, I don't, like, there's the bar set low. Like, I don't have to deal with people. I can just coach football.
Honestly, if Ohio State's not undefeated, like, through that middle section, if they drop 1 to Oregon or they go to Penn State, but they're so loaded that, like, they're opening 3, Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. There's no way those should even be games. Then they play at Michigan State, new coach. We have no idea what they're going to be like. That would be the upset of the year if Michigan State were to beat Ohio State. I would expect that to be like a 40-point beatdown. play Iowa, then Oregon, Nebraska, Penn State. Nebraska, they should be better, but like if Ohio State can get through that November stretch, then they play Purdue, Northwestern, Indiana before Iowa. Like we'll know what the Big Ten championship game is because they're not dropping any of those last 3 games. It'll either come down to the Ohio State Michigan game again by that point, or it'll be a number of like they lost to Penn State. Penn State's in the driver's seat. Oregon's in the driver's seat. Like I don't think it's going to be as big as what people think. I honestly think if I'm being realistic here, I was thinking that Oregon might have a heads up just because they only play Ohio State and Michigan. They don't play USC. They play Washington. But like Penn State, on the other hand, they have to win this year. Am I wrong? Their schedule, bro, is Charmin soft. I didn't even realize this. They play Illinois, UCLA, USC. USC is, like I told you, we don't know what they're going to be like. They play Wisconsin, then Ohio State, Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland. They should realistically lose 1, maybe 2 games. They get Ohio State at home. If they beat Ohio State at home, they should be undefeated. Their non-conference is West Virginia on the road, which I could see them muffing that one up because it's Franklin, They play Bowling Green and then Kent State. But that Big Ten schedule, now with like the coaching change at UCLA, USC having their roster overloaded, Washington having their roster overloaded, Wisconsin's still trying to switch all their personnel into air raid. That's not going to be an easy process for them still. Like, honestly, Penn State fans, they have to look at this and say, this is our year. If we blow this, we don't play Oregon, we don't play Michigan. I saw a couple playoff predictions, and they all had Penn State on the outside looking in. They had to not look at the schedule. Because, like, how? Penn State's been creaming these guys pretty much every year under Franklin. They've just been losing to Penn State or Ohio State and Michigan, and they don't play Michigan this year. And they don't get Oregon, the other top team coming in. If you're not pumped as a Penn State fan, I don't know what to tell you. This could be the year.
Well, I've made this comment about Ohio State in years past, and I feel like you could almost put some of the other Big Ten schools, like you put USC in this bubble, you can put Michigan in there. Like I feel like when you're a better team, why do you have to be cute with what you're running? Like I feel like that was one of the big things to Jim Harbaugh's credit. The couple games that he got to coach at Michigan last year, they just ran it like there was nothing cute about it. They got under center, they got in the eye, they ran it right down the field and put points on the board. And I feel like for whatever reason, there's times where like with Ohio State, they're producing talented receivers and guys that are getting drafted really high. And it's like they're just not. It's like you see that they have at times like 3-4 first round draft picks, but then they're running like a chuck and duck backyard football offense. It's like if you have this much talent, just play bully football. Like regardless of like what scheme you have, find a run concept and just run it down their face. Like why make this so overly complicated? Like I watched as teams in the Big Ten, like they're battling with each other and like having these really close scoring games. It's like it shouldn't even be close. Like you're recruiting. You have schools that are like they're high on this blue chip ratio playing teams that aren't, and it should just be like an absolute knockdown drag out. And I look at it to like the dynasty years at Florida State where like they went in and it was like you knew going in they were going to win. They went out there, they beat the brakes off someone, and we rolled forward. And like I like that mind. Like to me, I appreciate that so much more now, as I find myself on the more undersized card with coaching high school. But when you're a better team, just beat the crap out of them. Like it doesn't matter. Just win. Do the thing that you know you need to do to win.
I will say the last 3 years under Harbaugh have been nice because you knew we were going to win. And there was only like 2 or 3 games where it was going to be kind of close. And so then you just relaxed all game. And you're like, we're going to come back here. But a lot of times it was over at the first quarter or first half, like you said. That's why people were like, oh, he's doing the signs or whatever. And his after halftime stuff. But it's like, oh, he's just running the ball after halftime, guys, because they're up by 3 scores. What are you talking about? What adjustments is he making? Like, oh, just run Blake. That's what the sign said to do. It's like, it's hilarious. But to your point, I think a lot of coaches in the moment, like Franklin being one of them, he doesn't click and run with it. Like when he had Saquon, he knew that he could just run the ball and run his like little dink rollouts or whatever the heck, where he's just running screens to the running back and stuff because he knew he had a playmaker. And since he hasn't had him, like the offense has been very inconsistent because it's like they have big receivers at Penn State that are like pro level, but they don't like try to throw them the ball or like even just get them in space. And it's just a weird offense. Like they that one year they were playing Wisconsin in the championship game. I think it was a Saquon year. They got behind and then just started doing arm punts, and it was working because they were so much bigger than Wisconsin's guys. And it was almost embarrassing to like, oh my God, they could really kill these guys if they wanted to. But then it's like back to where they're playing Illinois and they're like having 88 2-point conversions in overtime because like, why not, right? They're not getting any of them, either team. It's like, we don't want to win the game. We'll just keep playing until we lose. So that's where the Big Ten coming in, are they getting a talent upgrade with these teams? I don't know. Right? The SEC is coming in. They're getting 2 of the top teams in the country and history in Texas and Oklahoma. The Big Ten's like, we're bringing in some big name programs, but like USC hasn't been a top dog in a while. Right? Have they even made the playoffs? No, I don't think so. It's been around since 2014. So like a decade. They haven't made it. Washington has made it twice. Oregon has made it once or twice. Did they make it twice? Maybe just once. The year whenever Jameis Winston threw that ball backwards and their guy picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown. Wasn't that like the first year though? And then they let Ohio State win the championship. Bad of them, right?
Well, so, and one of the things that I appreciate, and I feel like this is a mark of a good football team. I like when you're watching it and you kind of have an understanding of like what was supposed to happen on a play. Like if you have like a guy running a short route and somebody running a corner behind them, like I like that when you're watching and you can see like if something bad happens, say like receiver drops a ball, the quarterback overthrew him, like something within like the play, the way that it played out. I like being able to see it and go, okay, I understand what they were trying to do there. Like they didn't execute it perfectly, but schematically they were aligned for success. During some of those years that after Jimbo Fisher left, it was frustrating to watch with Florida State because they would run plays where it was like, what the hell are you doing? Like to me, that's more frustrating. And like with some of the other teams that like you watch, it's like when you're trying to like without having a vested interest in either game, like a random Big Ten game, and you're watching Wisconsin and Purdue play, and it's just like, what are you doing? Like, I don't even understand why. Like, are you just reaching into your grab bag of plays and like, I have my Madden cutouts of we're gonna run this one, we're gonna call this one, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It just looks chaotic.
Well, see, Purdue ran that awesome fake flea flicker in the Big Ten championship game, and they kept running with Blake last year. And I think that was that one play he almost fumbled. I don't know if that was a championship game or what, but I was like wondering, why didn't Michigan just pull out the fake flea flicker Purdue taught us? Like, just do that. Everyone knows he's flea flickering it every once in a while. But I like how the games kind of bring in some of those plays. It's the teams like Iowa where they have better talent than some of the Big Ten teams, like to your point. It's clear that Iowa's more talented than Illinois. Just look at the number of guys in the NFL, right? But, like, why are they not able to move the ball at all? And, like, their defense is so much better. And it's not like Iowa hasn't put tight ends and all other offensive players in the pros. Offensive linemen. Like, their offense should not be that bad. Was it just, like, Cade getting hurt? And they just haven't had a quarterback since, like, what, Drew Tate? Oh, no, Ricky Stanzi was after that. America. Ricky Stanzi. Right before the 4th of July, bringing him up. He was a classic Big Ten quarterback, dude. They haven't had a gunslinger like that. Maybe they have. What was the other undefeated year? I forget who their quarterback was. It wasn't Ricky Stanzi. Or then they lose to Michigan State, and Michigan State made the playoffs that year. I can't remember who the quarterback was. But Stanzi was like the last one I remember where he was like, you could feel that Iowa had a guy that was going to win, kind of like JJ last year for Michigan. Where it's like, all right, this guy knows what it takes to win. Now it's like, they can't even have a guy that knows what it takes to get a first down. And why? Like, I don't understand it. It's almost like Purdue always has a guy, or Northwestern always has a guy that's able to just like complete passes and be accurate. And then I watch other teams like in the SEC or the ACC, and they can't even complete a pass, like at Virginia or something. And I'm like, what are you doing? Wake Forest always has a guy that's like decent at completing passes, and then of course he transfers to Notre Dame and flames out. But some programs, I guess, just have a guy that can like evaluate that talent. Like Wisconsin, we can always find that running back that no one wants and turn him into an all-pro. But it comes down to like style. Now they're switching to air raid. What's going to happen? It would have been really interesting to see if Fickle would have been able to get the talent that Ohio State has. He probably would have won a championship there. It's kind of glad that Ohio State kind of passed him over. And stick with Ryan Day. Because Ryan Day, this year they have to win. They bloated their roster. If Penn State beats them this year, or Michigan beats them again, I could see Ohio State losing to Penn State, losing to Oregon, maybe, like if it melts down. And if they beat Michigan, that'll be enough to keep Ryan Day around. Even though that team, know how loaded it is, they just don't have a quarterback. So you don't know. Alar should make that jump for Penn State, and he should be the top quarterback in the Big Ten, right? I don't know what team has a better quarterback, at least in terms of talent and hype, right? Who's Oregon's quarterback? Did they have a quarterback come back, because they had Bo Nix, right? Didn't he go pro?
Yeah, he went pro.
So everyone has a new quarterback that's considered a top team in the Big Ten, except for Penn State.
As I say, I don't know all the quarterbacks yet because NCAA hasn't come out yet.
It's only 2 weeks away now?
Yeah.
If they put their name in, it'll be like when there was that one baseball game, and it was like Bo Jackson, or not Bo Jackson, one of my favorite guys, Bo Jackson, Barry Bonds, sometimes I get them mixed up. Barry, he wasn't in the game. And it was like they made the guy the exact opposite of him. But he still had 99 power. He was like a right-handed white guy. And I was like, who is this guy? And they're like, everybody opted in except for Barry Bonds. And I was like, damn, now I got to edit this guy. But they said in the NCAA you can't even edit because of the lawsuit. That if they didn't opt in, you can't edit the rosters. You're only able to download the updates from the server. So that's one of the things I'm going to kind of look out for. Is it going to be a problem? Like, I wonder how, I don't want to say it's a problem. If someone decided not to opt in, as a player, and you're trying to do NIL, a lot of guys get hyped up from a video game. And guys that might not even be the best in real life, right? Because you never know how sometimes a video game has a guy that people will just, if you go viral as like a third string running back that's like way better in the game for some reason, you can get your own NIL deal for like some esports game company. So as a player, I don't know why you wouldn't opt in. But I'm wondering what percentage of players didn't. Because remember, there were rumors that some teams weren't going to opt in. And then there was like major backlash because I think Notre Dame was one of them. And I'm sure their alums were like, you guys are idiots if you don't opt in. And then the players too, like if a guy doesn't opt in, let's wait and see. I'm sure it'll be some 5-star guy. So if the guy didn't opt in, he'd be a big namer. So we'll find out once the game launches.
Well, that was like Arch Manning didn't opt in because he wanted to focus on playing in real life.
Yeah, but he's not the starter. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about. I mean, he could be the starter if Quinn Ewers gets hurt. Like, could they sign like a late deal with him? But did he not opt into the game, or I thought he wasn't just doing any NIL? It was like something weird where he's like, "No, I'm gonna make money from my uncles." Because like no one would know who he is if he didn't have famous uncles. So like he doesn't need the NIL money. Like who's he joking, right? But who knows? We'll see if any big time starters or All Americans aren't on there, and what they ended up making them. Like, did they have to do the opposite, like the Barry Bonds character, where it's like, I know you're batting fourth for the Giants, buddy. I know this is Barry, even though he's like crouched down real low, like Jeff Bagwell used to do. It's like, what am I doing here? Who is this guy? But let's see. Oh, I brought it up because I started getting into college football and the realignment stuff. Because ACC announced that SMU and Stanford and Cal are in, and SMU has been pumping hard NIL, and I want to see how it works out for them. Because they're the pure underdog. It would be like giving Boise State a chance, but SMU is known for throwing money around at football. They got the death penalty because other teams didn't want to spend that much money. And now they could single-handedly save the ACC. Because if Florida State leaves and Clemson leaves.
When Florida State leaves.
They didn't leave yet, buddy. I was waiting for it. I kept waiting for the show. I'm like, all right, awesome. It'd be a great Big Ten show. We'll just be like, we're a Big Ten podcast now, baby. Florida State, Michigan. I'm talking about Penn State for some reason. Because I'm not going to be like a homer. If Penn State looks like this is their best chance, this is their best chance. It has to be this year. But if Florida State comes in, that'd be awesome too. Because I want the Big Ten to get into all the big states. But SMU right there, if those teams leave, or even if they don't, if they're able to NIL it up to where they're so talented that they become like an Oregon, where they're winning the ACC, or at least giving the illusion, because like Oregon didn't win the Pac-12 every year, right? But they gave the illusion that they were one of the top teams in the country, just because of hype, like Colorado, right? I saw like Colorado, people were complaining about their ratings being like higher. If you in NCAA football, since we were talking about that, a lot of people were complaining that their ratings like together on offense and defense are better than like established programs. Like I think maybe Michigan's offense is much lower, so like the overall might be lower than Colorado and like some other teams. And they're like, Colorado might not even be a top 25 team, guys. And then EA Sports put out a thing and they're like, look, we're still evaluating. But they have the guy on the cover. Like they're going to hype that team up. Like they're better than, I think they're better than like Oklahoma, Clemson, like a lot of big programs. Colorado's ratings, even though they were ranked like 25th or something in the game, their overall numbers were actually much better. And I joked with you, like in the 2014 game, I think Clemson was the same way. They had so much speed on their roster that even though they weren't ranked as like one of the top teams, maybe they were, I can't remember what the game was, but Clemson was one team where their guys had so much speed that I could just crush anyone with them. Didn't matter if they were playing as like Bama or like one of the number one teams. Team speed matters in some of those. And I think Colorado would be the team this year that a lot of people are going to end up using online for that reason. But going back to the SMU thing, all they need is a couple of big-time playmakers and NIL, and then they're already in Texas, so they can load up on some big linemen down there because everyone in high school is playing, right? Bring them down to SMU, and then just start crushing teams. Crushing. That's why I thought, like, I honestly, to be honest, I thought Liberty was going to be the team that, with how much money that they've been throwing around, like in their endowment and stuff, that I was waiting for them. And I think that's why they haven't gotten the chance for the call-up for some of these conferences, because they don't want a team to come in and throw money around. But the ACC was so desperate that they knew they needed a good football team. If Clemson and Florida State leave, they had no one that was invested in football, right? SMU is pretty much their lifeline, where they're like, we can't get Oregon. We know Boise State doesn't have the money to throw around. We would have liked to have them. And SMU's like, we're right here, 80s, baby. Bring us back. So I'm hoping that it takes off because, like, why not get a new team in there? SMU has nothing to do. There's no region to them. Southern Methodist University, right? Isn't that what that stands for? Why not? Do people even know? Isn't it in Texas? It's like in Dallas, isn't it? Them and TCU. They used to be rivals. So they could pretty much eliminate TCU. TCU is stuck in the Big 12 right now. SMU comes in and hammers it. Heck, if SMU starts winning championships and the Big 10 can't get Texas or A&M to leave, what if they just added a block where it's like, oh, we'll take SMU and TCU then, and just have our own Texas block of like private schools that are just going to throw money at the problem? I'd be for it. Get the recruiting ground in. Texas Tech would kind of be out there, but Texas Tech doesn't have the money that those other schools have. Prove me wrong. I think I saw someone do the research of like SMU, how if they wanted to invest, they could be better than Texas Tech in like 3 years. So now they have the chance to do it. Texas Tech has what? Never been to a playoff. They've won what? One share of the Big 12? I don't think they've ever won, even when Mahomes was there, right? Wasn't like they were winning. But that's my my fear with some of this is kind of related to the conference realignment now. They're talking about expanding the NCAA basketball tournament. And we previously had this discussion trying to bring back some long-term blog posts to help expand the show here and the reach, bring in some new audience in terms of football. But one of the topics that I had in my notes to come back to is that I thought that the conference tournaments for the basketball had too much weight because they were taking teams that, like, whatever, you win the Big East, and they were like, oh, we got to put you on the 4 seed line then, baby. You're hot right now. Or like NC State gets in, and they're pumping them up, and then they actually do make the Final Four. So then you're like, maybe they're wrong. Like, maybe I'm wrong on this, and maybe the conference tournament results should matter. But now it doesn't even matter anymore because the NCAA is going to take that away. They want to add another play-in round so that the conference tournaments are going to have even more weight, I believe, where I could be wrong on this, but I think if you win the conference tournaments, you make it technically to the second round, and that automatic four-game play-in that we talked about, now that's going to be expanded to like 12 games or something. And I don't know when they're going to play it. Because traditionally right now, I think they play it on Tuesday, Wednesday, right? Are they going to be able to shove 12 games on Tuesday and Wednesday and then have those teams fly out Thursday? I feel like they're going to push the whole tournament back. And then the NCAA basketball tournament is going to be going to like the middle of or end of April, which is going to mess with the entire flow of things. And I heard some coaches comment on it. I read some. I didn't write down who they were, but I think maybe Tom Izzo was one of them. He was like, yeah, they should have a chance for some of these big conference programs to really get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. I'm like, buddy, they had like 8 teams from each big conference every year. Did we need 10? Like, what are you talking about? The Pac-12 is disappearing. That means the Big Ten is going to go from having 8 bids to probably 10 every year anyway. Do they need to have 12 or 14 of the 18 teams making a tournament? No. We already played 20 games in the regular season. We know some of these teams have only won 3 Big Ten games. They don't need to get into the tournament to see if they're actually good. Like, we know they're not. And so like, it's almost like they were like, hey, it would be nice if we had one more gambling weekend. And we're going to tell everybody that this is the last expansion we're doing. But secretly, we do want to expand again and make it like a 90. Because I thought the ultimate goal was to make it a 96-team tournament where there were no more play-ins anymore, right? Is that what the math would be?
I think.
I don't know if that's the right math or not. Maybe it had to be 120-something. Maybe 96 is what it would be. But they wanted to expand it so that there was one more round and so that maybe only the conference tournaments. But like I said, I thought that they already had way too much power to begin with. some of the lower schools, like they would be winning 27 games or whatever. Like, let's say a team like Gonzaga, if they lose their conference tournament to a 12-win team on a luck, they're out. They're not getting that bid. And then even if you expand the tournament, they're not going to just let some teams like that in. I use Gonzaga because they have a big name. But like, let's be real. If it was like St. Francis, PA, went like 30, they went like 30 and 4 or something like that, and they lost their conference tournament, they would not be in the tournament. There's 100% chance that they're not letting them in. They're going to say, buddy, we saw you won 30 games, but should have won your conference tournament if you really wanted in. Meanwhile, it would be like they're losing like Sacred Heart or something, has like 12 wins, and then they're the rep for their conference. It's all bias. And I feel like I'm worried the way the college football playoff is going. But I want more teams to have access. But I also want all conferences to have an auto bid. But don't let that push them out. Like, don't auto bid a team. Like right now, we're going to auto bid you and you get a bye. I still feel like that's going to screw teams in college football. Because they're going to be just 1 or 2 weeks colder than the team that they're playing. And that team's going to come in hot, and they're going to railroad them. Especially
You're
like the 4 seed playing like what? They'd be playing like the 5 seed. They had just had to beat it at 12 seed as like a warm-up or something. Boom. Upset city. The 5-4 is going to be the upset matchup to watch every year. It's going to be like the 5-12 in college basketball tournament. Heck, even the 6-3 I could see. Because if the 6 teams play in the 11th seed, a lot of times that's going to be like what, a Notre Dame, a team that's not really there to compete. They're just there for the hype. I think the latest I saw was like Missouri. Like I'm not going to be hyped if like Missouri's playing Oregon. Like Oregon should easily handle them this year. And then Oregon's going to come in hot, playing the 3rd seed, automatic conference bid. Who knows who that's going to be? What if it was like Wake Forest or something from the ACC? Probably get the floor wiped with them by a hot Oregon team. Like it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's not going to line up exactly like everyone says, because we've seen teams kind of back in the past couple years. But that's what I'm waiting for. I wasn't even going to talk about football this long, or college conferences, to be honest. I wanted to talk about some NBA stuff, but. Anything else you have in terms of college realignment?
The only thing with the realignment is I'm just waiting to see when the shoe's going to drop, because there's the SEC's kind of posting about how they don't feel like they're a good fit for the SEC, but I almost get that vibe of it's like, we know you're not going to us, and with this being such a dead period that it's like, we need to just hit the talking point. So we're just going to say, well, we don't want them in our conference anyhow, kind of hedging themselves that when the move actually does take place. Because I think after the dust settles and the teams in the ACC know how much it's going to be to get out of the conference, that's going to be where the next domino falls. Because then it's going to be, which conference are some of these other people going to be jumping to, and it's going to be a little bit clearer of a picture. But I definitely think by the end of this month we'll have a better idea of what the lay of the land's going to be.
But that's where I'm with you on that. I think the SEC, there's only 2 options. They're either saying that they don't want them to help with their negotiations with the ACC, but ESPN has the rights for both. So I'm kind of leaning towards they're saying that they don't want them to make themselves look better because they know that they don't want to do a deal with the ACC, and they're jumping to the Big Ten. And the Big Ten right now, I've said it before, in terms of Florida State's power, they could potentially be a top 10 program. I just don't think they were around long enough as some of the other schools. But in terms of like winning percentage, they're near the top. So bringing them in is going to be bringing in a top football program. The SEC, something has to break here. They only play 8 games right now. There's going to be pressure to make them play more, especially with ESPN. They're not going to want to be paying millions of dollars, especially if they're trying to get them to match the Big Ten. When the Big Ten has 9-game schedule, so the TV partners get an extra game each year. The ESPN's not going to allow them to just keep playing 8 games and pay them top dollar. They're just not. They don't have the inventory. So what would happen is they bring in Florida State, but then you get to the point where, hey, we have all these top football programs. Now they're not all going to keep winning 10 games. It's impossible. Like, you're bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. They're used to winning 10 games every year. Well, maybe not Texas, but Oklahoma's used to winning that every year. If that doesn't happen in the SEC, does Oklahoma's hype just nosedive and they kind of just turn into like what Nebraska has done in the Big Ten? Because Nebraska was brought in to fix a void where the Big Ten didn't have a power in that western side, and then Nebraska didn't deliver. That's why I said if Florida State comes right in to the Big Ten, they have a chance to be a pillar of the East with Penn State, because Penn State hasn't delivered. Like, they just need someone else to win the national championship. In my lifetime, only Ohio State and Michigan, they've each won 2 national championships in the Big Ten. No one else has done it. Penn State hasn't done it. They could claim 1994, so you could say that they've done it in my lifetime. But I think everything else was before I was born. So, like, and they weren't even in the Big Ten at that point. So, win it. Michigan State, hey, we got there. We were close. We made the playoffs. We got killed. Awesome. Like, Iowa, undefeated, almost got there. What was it, Brad Banks year when Ohio State did win it? They get killed by USC. Otherwise, who knows? People were talking about maybe voting them as national champs if Ohio State won it, because they had the one loss, but it was because of fumbles or whatever. You never know. That could have been a split championship from the Big Ten because they didn't play each other. That would have been insane. It didn't happen. Other teams have to show up. Florida State would be a team that could show up. Oregon right now, you're coming to the Big Ten. You have the money now. You have everything on your side. USC, no excuses anymore. The Big Ten needs a Western team to win it or an Eastern team to win it. It can't just be the Midwest Conference. They tried to get the Southwest kind of thing with Nebraska, even though they're not pure Southwest, and it didn't happen. Anyone in the Midwest couldn't really win it other than Ohio State and Michigan, so they need the other teams. SEC already has multiple teams winning the championship. 5 or 6 of them in the past, 10, 20 years? So the Big Ten needs to match it. Bring in Clemson, bring in Florida State. They've won it recently. In my lifetime, in the past decade, they've each won a championship. I guess not Florida State anymore. Past decade plus. It's like a year out, right? Or 2 years out. Pretty close. Bring them in. USC is a little bit further out. Bring them in. And then you're able to say, like, look, we have these teams that have won championships. But they also have to do it in the Big Ten. Have to do it in the Big Ten. Because if the Big Ten wants to keep making the top money, everything's laid out for it. You bring in top teams. You have a bunch of teams that are just historically, mid? Is that what we would say? Winning 8 games. People are pumped.
Yep.
They're like happy to be there, but they own the entire state. Like, you go to Minnesota, who else are you cheering for? No one. Minnesota's the hype. Like, I remember when they were hyped coming in, was it a couple years ago? Michigan crushed them on that one Saturday night game. It was like PJ Fleck has the boys rolling, and their quarterback threw a pick 6 like one of the first plays. And I thought, well, this game's over. And then Michigan just railroaded them. And that's what I thought. Like, Minnesota was so hyped for that game. And then just to get killed had to be embarrassing. But then it didn't stop them. The very next week, they're back pumped up, baby. They were like, Michigan's way better than us. But we can still win the Big Ten West. Now I don't know if that's ever possible for them, right? Will they win the Big Ten? Who knows? Like, what's going to be? That's why I'm wondering. I've been saying that the Big Ten had teased, or at least maybe I'm just making this up, but they had teased about doing a showcase where you have the Big Ten championship that weekend, but then you have like 2 or 3 other games. Give them some weird trophy name like the bowl games, but it's basically just Big Ten centric. Like, oh, you can get a Heartland trophy. I think that's one of the trophies that they already have out there. Or like, you get this trophy. So even if you don't win the conference, you can still get like a Commissioner's Cup type trophy that weekend for finishing like 4th. Right? And it also helps get other teams in the championship game. or playoffs helps by seeding. And I think that would be a good thing for some of the smaller schools, like in Indiana or like even in Maryland, getting things rolling. Oh, yeah, but we lost to Penn State and Ohio State again. But at least we're playing Illinois now for the fourth place trophy. They wouldn't call it the fourth place trophy. They'd make something up like, who knows, like the Corn Bowl trophy. And it's like, yeah, we can win the Corn Bowl trophy. And I think teams would like that, right? You're rebuilding a new coach. You're coming in, winning another Big Ten trophy. If they did the top three, if they did the top 6 teams, that'd be 3 games, 3 trophies a year, kind of like a gold, silver, bronze. Why not? If you can't finish in the top 6 out of 18, I was thinking 4, because when the conference inevitably expands to include Florida State and Clemson or Miami or whoever they take, that's going to be, I think 4 is going to be needed. Gold, silver, bronze, and then what's after that? Nickel?
Participant.
Yeah, you're here. That's the corn trophy. Just a bowl of corn. And then the winner has like corn, not like actual corn you eat, but like pig corn, because it's in it different. You just have it poured out on you. Like you go to take your kids to like the farm park, and they always have like, hey, go play in the sand. Oh, that's not sand. That's just corn. Then it's in your shoe and you can't get it out. That's what it'd be like. So it's in the coach's polo. But that's my hype. That's what I want from the Big Ten and all this expansion. Make it worthwhile. Expanding the tournaments just makes the conference tournaments, like whatever, they kind of matter. If it gives them a bye, conference championship, if it gives you a bye, awesome, it might not work out. But I want some clarity on that going forward when they try to get these big mega conferences in. Because like if you're playing an 18-team tournament before the basketball tournament, your guys are going to be tired. If you're already in the tournament, why not just like forfeit and take a day off? Or just lose on purpose, play your backups. Like, oh, we're a lock. We have 25 wins. We're just going to, bench our guys and rest them up. We don't need to play an 8-game grueling schedule right before the tournament, right? Why'd you do that to yourself? But the other thing I want to talk about was the NBA. NBA has been making some crazy moves. I mentioned them drafting a Bronny, didn't I, at the beginning of the show? I don't even know. I got off my notes because I started talking about college football. But Lakers draft him to keep LeBron happy, which makes me think that the championships are going to kind of stay in the East. The Celtics were able to lock in most of their team for another run next year, and I think a long-term deal. But out of nowhere, Philadelphia, the Sixers, getting Paul George, which I've been a fan of, comes in, and they're making another push. And I feel like they've been there and it hasn't happened. And maybe it will never happen. But at least they're trying, right? Honestly, I didn't think the Celtics were going to be. I was telling you, I think we were talking about on the show maybe, that this was the year for the Celtics. If they didn't win this year when they had the best record and were playing an easy, like a 5 seed or whatever in the championship, then they needed to blow it up. Like if the Mavs would have beat them, this is the best chance, and luckily they got it done. And now I'm fine with them extending everybody. Like, bring the boys back. You had the best record. Can you do it 2 years in a row? I don't care if everyone thinks they're bums and overrated. They won the championship. Like, I'd rather be in that situation than like the Lakers, where it's like LeBron, he's old. They haven't really won anything. He's bringing his son in. Then he's holding out, trying to get more money. But then he said he might take less money because his son's there. Like, what are you doing? Imagine being in that front office and just having to deal with him. It would be insane.
They're better people than I am. I mean, I looked at the Paul George sign and I thought, hold your breath, hold your horses, because we've been down this road before, and I want to see, can the Sixers stay healthy into the playoffs? Because I feel like they're always, by the time the playoffs hit, somebody's injured. Like, they don't have the consistency to finish out a series, and they end up choking it away at some point. It's like, I want to just see, like, maybe this is the final piece, because they went aggressive and signed some other guys too, and I thought this has a feel like you're trying, but I didn't know if it was enough. And I feel like with the last signing, it's like, okay, you have enough talent there that you should definitely compete, but can you finish it out, or are you going to fold under the pressure?
Well, see, the thing is, there's no way that they should have been like even out of the playoffs, or would they play in the play-in games or whatever the heck. So they might have made the playoffs. I don't remember how the whole thing shook out, but they had that where they were like in the play-in. They should never even have been in that scenario. But it reminded me of last year where it's like the Celtics probably could have won the championship last year. Who won it? The Nuggets over the Heat or something like that. The Celtics came out flat against the Heat because they thought they were better. And then they battled all the way back to Game 7. And it looked like they were going to clean house. I think it was in Boston. And just beat them, go to the championship. But then Tatum got hurt. And that's why I was thinking, like, oh, man, is it another thing where it's like one injury? Like, I remember Garnett got hurt the one year where it looked like the Celtics could have won 2 with him, Pierce, and Ray Allen. And Garnett gets hurt. And so they end up winning 1 with that group. And at some point, it's like, just win 1. Just win 1. The Sixers, stay healthy, they could win 1. Like, there's not really any other favorites out there. Looking around, like, Boston was the only team that had 60 wins. The West had Oklahoma City and, like, Denver tied. Denver had just won the championship, I'm pretty sure, the year before. Nothing, like, really on top where it's like, oh, teams winning 60-plus games or 70 games, like Golden State was doing, where you knew going into the playoffs that they were going to win. And they were most likely going to win the championship. Where the Sixers, all they have to do, I mean, Boston was in kind of, I guess they weren't really pushed in the playoffs, but Pacers had them for a while there. Then, who did they end up playing? I think they beat the Bucks, but was it the Heat again? I forget even what the playoffs end up being this year. But it was almost like Boston had a chance to kind of blow it, and they just didn't. Like, at the end of the game, all the shots were falling against Indiana, and it was like, oh, this is crazy. The team put it together. But that's why I would rather be the Sixers than like to see Detroit just constantly rebuilding, never winning any of the draft tokens or whatever. Or it's like, we're going to get a top pick. Like, no, Detroit, you're not. Pick 7 or whatever. And it's unbelievable because they have the best odds every year, it seemed like, the last couple of years, just to watch Boston fall off. At least the Sixers are middling for the playoffs, but they're making moves. And now they have, 3 All-Stars? 3 seems to be the magic number. Right?
Yeah.
Celtics had Smart, Brown, and Tatum. And Smart, when they got rid of him and brought in Porzingis, the team totally changed. Because, like, the Mavs had, when Porzingis played that first game and he looked kind of healthy, the Mavs had no answer. And he was even the 6th man. Because, like, of course you have to have old man Horford on the court at the beginning. Or whoever else is out there. It's like, all right. They have a bunch of guys, but it wasn't like, these guys are all all-stars awesome. It was like, bring in Porzingis. He's big, can shoot, and he's good enough to stretch the court. Now with Paul George, his defense is good enough with Embiid. Like, go ahead, let's see what happens. I want to have more power. Because right now it doesn't feel like, at least from the Boston side, that there's another team in the East that, like, at the beginning of the year, I can say, like, well, I can't wait to watch some of these battles. It's kind of just like, oh, we're playing this team. Should kill them. Wonder how we'll blow it. Right? So bring on a good Sixers team. I'm excited for this. I liked whenever they had the battles a couple years ago. Was it like Harden and them? And then neither team won. Like, it's funny, right? Bring that back, because the East has none of those other top teams. Like, there's a clear drop-off last year from the Celtics to the Knicks, who finished second. Like, did anyone believe the Knicks had a chance to win the championship? No. 0 chance. No one even thought that they would be there. Sixers now have that hype. So,
well, and I think, like, you need a big man, you need a ball handler, and you need a shooter. And I feel like that's kind of been the common theme with all of these super teams is that there's some level of like three players that just they work well together that you can't just double up on one guy.
That's why it always annoyed me that the Heat had Duncan Robinson because he went to Michigan, and he's been like their star shooter. And every time he shoots the ball, I'm like, damn it, he's gonna make it. And as a Michigan man, it's like you can't cheer against him.
Well, that was why I got so pissed off when they let Jimmy Butler go to the Heat because I was like, he was a good all around guy. I was like, you're only one player away from having the magical three that you need to compete for a title.
Well, yeah. So they did play the Celtics this year. I thought that we played the Heat again, but it was like they split the first two, and I thought, oh, here we go again. It's gonna be just like last year. But the Heat with Butler and them, there's no reason they should be finishing, like 7th or 8th or 12th, whatever they had finished, to just get into the play-in games. Like, I don't understand how some of the teams can't put it together and be a consistent top challenger, right? I don't know what the odds are, what like the history is of like the Celtics the past couple of years have been in the finals, have been close, but they've always finished like in the top of the East. And they haven't had anyone that's consistently been battling them. It's been like the Bucks 1 year, the Sixers a couple of years. I want like a good battle like it used to be back when LeBron was with the Cavs and Paul Pierce and them. Like they were battling every year in the playoffs. Kind of like, I mean, the Heat have seemed to get it, but it's like, it's a little weird when it's like the first series because they're like the 8 seed. Not a good battle. It's like 1 versus 8, I guess. But you never know. They had a lot of people picked from overseas, and that's kind of weird for me because it's like, hey, pick from France. Awesome. Do I know this guy? Nah. They picked a guy. Detroit picked a guy from the G League, which I'm like, is that even a thing? How do you do that? I think actually the first couple picks, because I think, Charlotte picked a guy from France too. Everyone's getting picked from France. I'm like, what do they have? A gigantic league over there now? Before it would always be like one random guy from Germany or like Yao Ming from China or whatever. Not like 3 guys from France. That'll be the next. I told you that'll be the next Big Ten expansion. They'll add a team from Paris and a team from London and Toronto, and become the nation. Whatever, it'd be like the Big Ten countries. They'll change it from whatever to they'll have 10 countries, Matt. And then it'll be the most powerful conference in the world. But I think that's kind of all I had, right? Basketball, I want to talk a little bit about the NBA stuff, and then the conference tournaments for college and things, which we already talked about because I got into the football talk. I can't get away from it. Football season's coming up. When they do the All-American list, you know that the season's getting closer. So now we're getting to the point where we're going to start seeing some training camp stuff, right? July.
Yep.
Going out there, training camp. Then we'll have the Hall of Fame game. That usually kicks it off, right? And early August, I'll have to get the fantasy league set up. We have to get that rolling again. And just hope that we have another great year of football. But anything else you want to talk about on the show this week?
No, I think we hit it.
Yeah, normally the show, I've been trying to keep us around an hour, but the last couple weeks, man, I'll admit it, I didn't have any topics. But now with the conference expansion actually happening, we're on watch. Who's going to be the next team to move? Florida State? Will Clemson leave? Will they go independent? Will Notre Dame make a move? Their board was discussing financials. That's what I want to see. Who is the next team to make that move? But if you have any topics, like I said, we're going to be doing some recap for the next couple weeks because it's off season and I don't have a lot of big things to talk about. So if there's any big topics you want to hear, let us know. We do have the Olympics coming up, so we'll talk on that and have that to look forward to. But thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.